Hey there, everyone. Welcome to week 2. We made it through week 1. We're off and rolling. So congrats for making it this far already. We got a little ways to go, but we're out of the gate, so that's good. I wanted to wait until I graded your first research papers before I made this first video, just so I could maybe give you some feedback on that. So I just finished grading those, and overall I felt like they went really well. So kudos for the work you put in to that. And this pattern, so we're going to do 7 total of those research papers. So the pattern will be the same for those, at least that they're due on Sunday, and have some very similar aspects to them. So the first one was just any article out of Preventing Chronic Disease, the journal, the CDC's journal there, and out of the year 2022. And then this one, so make sure you look for the year, I think it's 2021 on this week 2 that's due there. So it can be anything, again, that you find interesting. The point of it is to just get familiar with the journal and what kind of articles that they have, because, in picking an article, you have to read through the titles and to kind of see how it's laid out and so forth. But if it's in that category of original research, that's what you're looking for. And so it seemed like the one issue that some people had trouble with was the AMA citation. And so just to clarify, that should be at the top of the first page. And you don't necessarily even need a title page for this, but you can have a title page. And then on the next page, if you're creating a title page, the next page at the top, having the research citation on there in AMA style, AMA formatting style. And then to summarize the article. And one of the things that helps, just as far as feedback go, and some of you have done this, but when you summarize it, you could take each section and summarize it that's in the article, like introduction, summarize that, and background information, summarize that, method, summarize that, results, summarize that, conclusion, summarize that. You could just make those headings within your paper and just do a short summary of those. That might be helpful for some of you as far as structuring it. And then after that, just giving how you see that material that you just read being applicable or implementable into the health and wellness field. I mean, that's the last part of it. And the whole thing only needs to be 3 pages long, but if it goes longer, that's fine. But if you can be clear and brief to 3 pages, that's great too. But I think the one hiccup for some people was the AMA citation style, and I think it's mostly because some people are not used to that style. It's what we use within the program, and so you say, why does it matter? Well, there are, as you might know, there are several ways to cite your work, to use a reference citation style. There are several out there, APA, MLA, AMA, and others. Why do we use AMA in our program? Well, it's because the majority of journals that we use for this material we're teaching in this program in general come from use AMA style. And so it makes sense for us to use it too within our program, and also to just use one style and be consistent in that way, as opposed to all comers for style. And so the other courses that we have in our program, doesn't matter. Yes. Does it matter as much as this course? Probably no. I mean, this course is primarily designed around of course, research and reading research and writing research, and so that's when it sort of matters in that aspect. So that's why we're going to be a little bit more particular about making sure the style is the way it should be. And so if there were points deducted, it's most likely came from, the majority anyway, would come from that way, that area. But as it's first week, and I think as we get into a rhythm here, then you get used to the AMA style more, and looking at it more particularly how it's supposed to be cited there. And I made send out another reference for that. I believe we probably have done in the past at somewhere, but I've got a couple references I can send you as far as just summarizing AMA style. But you can also, look it up too on how you cite AMA and get it from there. So if you have questions on that, let me know. But just in general, you'll recognize majority AMA style if it's superscripted, within the text. Citing within the text is superscripted, and then it has the the style specifically on the reference itself on how it's written out. And I think the majority of you did a great job. And one of the things to keep in mind with the Preventing Chronic Disease journal is that because it's an electronic journal, it doesn't necessarily have page numbers like a journal that's printed, and so the DOI is probably needed on that reference too. And as opposed to, you don't want to reference it, so this is a point of clarification. In AMA style, of course, if you use a website, let's say you found something on the American Medical Association's website, or say American Psychological Association website, that they published some type of article that was written in there. Not necessarily, maybe not a scientific article, but maybe it was, one of their writers summarized something, and you found it on their website and you wanted to cite that. Well, there's a format for that in AMA, and it typically, has where you put the author, and it may have an author, it may not, it might just be the American Psychological Association. And then you put in available at, and then you put the URL, and then accessed on, and then you put the date that you got into it or referenced it there. And that's the right style for a website. That is not the right style to do to a journal article like in Preventing Chronic Disease. That actually has, a specific, because it's a journal, it has a specific format for that. And it may not have page numbers because it's electronic. So you would want to use the DOI number sequence for that, which is available right there on the article that you can find right there. So, and just as a point of reference, it is now really common for so many journals to actually give the citation style as they recommend it, or as they have already laid it out. A lot of times when you access journals electronically, there'll be a little button, look for it on the side on the side that says citation on it. And it'll actually have options on there on how you can use it, and then, sometimes even integrate it right into your paper. But at least it'll give the style and written out for you. You may have to tweak it a little bit to AMA if it's not exactly perfect, but at least it gets you kind of started there. So it's a nice little thing to have when you're referencing, and that's one of those necessary evils, I would say, to doing any type of research writing, is making sure that the referencing is correct, at least that the authors are getting the credit and so forth. That was one comment I wanted to make. Another one, there's two other ones that I wanted to make for this week. So this week we are reading in Bergen Latten's book. We're reading a few chapters here about research writing. The one I want you to pay particular attention to would be chapter 4, where it's titled the research paper and proposal. The reason for that is when we get to towards the end of the class, you'll be designing and developing your own program. And to write that up, it's going to be written up very similar to how it is written up in chapter 4, at least the different sections or headings. And so I just wanted to explain that a little bit here, because I'll do it again in more detail as we get down the road on what's required there. But the way chapter 4 in the book is written out, I'm just looking at the book chapter here, they have what would be included in the first 4 chapters of if you were writing a thesis. Now, of course, we're not writing a thesis in this program, certainly not in this class. So that's the one thing I wanted to caution you about, is doing this paper that comes at the end when you develop this program. It is not the size of a thesis. I know some of you might be tempted to do that because you think it will, that it has to be at that type of level, but I assure you it does not. But the format is what we will use, so the different sections of it. And what you'll notice, as I hope you notice as you go through chapter 4, when you learn what all the sections are, or what they call chapters, to a thesis, are very similar to those that are in research articles. So the ones that we're reading in Preventing Chronic Disease in the original research section have very consistent headings in those, and that's pretty consistent with what a thesis does as well, except where we're going to stop short on this is not, of course, doing the research project or doing, writing up the results or conclusions, but just the front end part of that, the proposal, I guess, is, if you will, part of that. And just to even further that, most grant applications also have this same format, where you start off with some type of introduction, and then a statement of what the problem is, a review of the literature, and then a procedure or methods section. And that's how most grants like to see it as well. And of course, in the grant part, this is just a little FYI, if you're ever writing grants, if you write it up like this, that's already in the format that you're going to write it up for on your journal article once you do the research and analyze and then put the conclusions in, the results and conclusions. So you have the front part of the paper already written if you do it in that format out of the gate. It's structured, it makes sense, it's consistent with what journals are looking for, with the way you read them as well. So it all has a very similar flow to it. And that's why I felt like it would be a good idea for you in this final paper for this class that you write it up in that way. So I guess in a very long-winded way, pay attention to chapter 4 because it'll give you good information about what we're going to be doing as we keep going in through this course. The one thing I did wanted to make, you'll notice in these chapters that we're reading, there is some outdated, of course, information in here, particularly in the way you look for journal articles, because it does still talk a lot about, the difference between electronic journals and, just plain old going to the library and pulling out the paper journal. That old school way is going away, most certainly is going away. And so we are really into mostly electronic journals and accessing them electronically now. And that's, of course, a good evolution. And I feel like the way we should be going. So there's just, for what it's worth, there's some outdated stuff in this particular book and with that type of information. But it is wrapped around the whole concept of searching and how you search for articles and all of that. There's still some good information there, at least theoretically, how you go about doing it. The last thing I wanted to say is in weeks 5 and 6, your research articles will focus on qualitative research as opposed to quantitative. And after this second week, we'll be just focusing for a few weeks on finding quantitative research studies for you to write your papers on. And then we'll switch to qualitative research. Now, the Preventing Chronic Disease, there's mostly a quantitative journal. There's not a lot of qualitative research unless it's a mixed method, which includes both quantitative and qualitative. So what I'm going to do is send an email that steers you to another resource for this. And it was something I thought of before I put the syllabus together, but I gotten a little bit of feedback already from people that said, I'm having trouble finding qualitative, and it is just the sense that I had when I put it together. This might be a little difficult in that journal, Preventing Chronic Disease. So there's a separate database that we have access to, you have access to at the Creighton Library, that just focuses on qualitative research. It's called JSTOR, JSTOR. It's a great resource, and there's tons. So it's It's a database, which means there's a whole bunch of journals that feed into that database. And so what I'm going to do before I send it out is try to weed out a few of those, maybe steer you in a direction of some journals that might be a little bit overlapping as far as some of the information that we study in this program. And so that might be helpful for you to go to those particular journals. But I have to think through that a little bit before I would say anything that you find that's qualitative is totally fine. But I want to maybe steer you to a couple of journals so that it helps at least narrow it down, as opposed to you looking at the hundreds of journals that are accessible within JSTOR. That at least it can narrow down a little bit for you. But I wanted to just throw that out there, that I'm going to make that little nuance in weeks 5 and 6 that we're doing the qualitative, that it doesn't have to come from Preventing Chronic Disease. It can come from a different journal. So anyway, okay, so if you have questions on this, which you may, let me know. Certainly we will hopefully be able to answer some questions in the optional Zoom session that we've got this week. And I'll record that if you're not able to attend, so no worries. But otherwise, if you have any other questions, just reach out to me, send me an email and let me know. All right, I'll talk to you soon.